Okay, time for another video that you didn't ask for. This is my second of my first impressions, if there's such a thing, second video of first impressions of a 997. And I offer this up because I don't know a lot about 997s. I've just been looking for Porsche 911s over the last 2-3 years, been investigating, watching a lot of YouTube. And I ended up with a 997, a year 2007. And I just wanted to talk about some more kind of things that I discovered about it. Maybe none of it is that earth-shattering, but I thought it might be interesting to share. So here we go.
Let's start in the front of the car. First of all, when you lock the car and unlock the car, it doesn't beep or anything. So you kind of know, you're wondering at first, is it locked or not? So discovered that if you lock it, it's going to flash twice on the blinkers. And if you unlock it, it's going to flash once. And then it turns on these courtesy, I think they call them home lights or daytime running lights. Now maybe that's configurable at the dealer. They can change it so it honks or not. I'm not sure, but just thought that was kind of interesting. Number two, I was given 2 keys with the car. One of them had this little Porsche crest missing, so of course you don't want to carry that one around in case you happen to be at coffee with somebody and put the keys down on the table. You want them to know that you drive a Porsche. All joking aside, the car's smart enough to know that you have key number 2. I bring this in there, and I forget if it's on the Porsche infotainment PCM, it says key number 2, or maybe it says it in the center gauge. Now, that begs the question, can you kind of do some customization? I was under the impression that you might be able to do that based on the key number. Like, would it make some setting changes? But there's not that much that's configurable in the car, so I don't know what that would be. That would be configurable. I opened this beautiful little case with your maintenance, owner's manual, etc. And I was so excited to see this little card here. I was thinking, oh, maybe this is like the official Porsche owner's card. When I next go to the LA Car Show, I can get into like the Porsche owner's lounge, which is overcrowded and probably a waste of my time anyway. But then I flipped it over and it looks like it maybe has a little more of a utilitarian purpose. This card is used to pull your blinkers fog lights off. So you jam it in the side, then you can get your blinkers off. Kind of interesting. All right, now let's move on to options. That's kind of fun to look at. I don't know when they stopped putting this sticker on the hood. I think someone said Porsche 996s for sure had this little option sticker here on the hood, and the 997s, they stopped doing that a lot. But it's fun to look up these codes to see what they mean. So I went to stutcars.com, and you can kind of type in the year and like you say Porsche 997 year 2007, and it'll give you what these mean. Well, let's go through some of them because I found them kind of interesting. Some of them were kind of boring, like the XRP, that's 5mm spacers on all wheels. So I guess depending on the rims or the tires or something, they put spacers. The XPA, that one cracked me up. I mentioned it in an earlier video. That means a thicker steering wheel. Who knew? You could order a slightly thicker steering wheel. The XSC, that's kind of a cool one. That's the Porsche emblem in the back of the seats up at the headrest. A couple things that denote black instrument panel and black stopwatch. Here's what's kind of interesting. 375, that's the left seat as a sports seat, and 376 is the right seat. So does that mean you could get like a different seat on the driver's side versus the passenger side? Not that you would ever do that. And the other one was 575. That's called luggage compartment cooling. So I'm assuming that means in the front trunk, maybe there's a vent from your air conditioner, so if you're bringing home butter or milk from the store, it won't get cold. All right, now since I'm looking at my workbench here, this is not brake fluid. When I had the oil changed, I asked my mechanic Peter at Stut Cars in Pasadena to save me a sample because I'd been watching YouTube and the Flat 6 Innovations, and the Flat 6 Innovations said go ahead and try and do a used oil analysis. I'd never heard of that before, and what they recommend is speeddiagnostics.com. So I saved some oil. I'm gonna get a little kit from Speed Diagnostics. I think they're around maybe $60 for one kit, or you save some money if you get 2. But they can do some analysis on your oil
and see if there's, I forget the material, somebody can tell me in the comments, but if you're worried about bore scoring, it can check some of the material that's coming off the cylinder walls. You can check for metal, it's checking for aluminum. It's checking for contaminants in your oil that might indicate. And they literally, like if you do that on a regular basis, they can tell a lot about your engine. So I think that would be useful. Also, another thing I got from Flat 6 Innovations was they recommended to change the oil every 5,000 miles or 6 months, regardless. Even if you'd done very few miles, the worry was that if it went much more than 6 months, there could be contaminants in the oil. Let's say there's some fuel slipping by your cylinders, getting into the oil, etc. So when I got this car, I had a Carfax report that said that it had been changed only like 2,000 or 3,000 miles ago, but then I looked at the date, it was quite old. It was like a year and a half. So just to be safe, I changed the oil. So that's the thing on the oil. Okay, I might have mentioned this before, but if you have the home link with the remote control, the sensor for that sends a signal to your garage door opener is not up in the mirror. So if you're trying to press your little remote control to program the home link, it doesn't work. The sensor is actually somewhere around here. The owner's manual tells you that. So if you're using your remote control to program the home link in the mirror, then the sensor's here, FYI. Another thing I noticed, I opened up this and I was using my flashlight here, and it's got a magnet on it. Of course, it's gonna stick to metal, but it didn't stick to the hood. I don't know if that's in the camera frame. So actually, let's bring that up a bit. So it doesn't stick to the hood. So I thought, okay, cool. I've got a carbon fiber hood. Okay. No more comments, please. I looked at the seams here, and clearly that doesn't look like carbon fiber. I looked it up, and this is aluminum. So I'm curious, when did they start putting aluminum hoods or bonnets from my UK brethren and sisters? When did they put aluminum hoods on the 911s? Was that the 996 era, the 997, back in air-cooled days? I don't know. Little thing here, there's a little latch here in the front trunk, and I at first was afraid to pull that, thinking, oh no, is that like, could drop the front bumper off or something. That's simply just an emergency latch if, God forbid, somebody gets trapped in your front trunk, and it'll activate this latch so you can get out, and that, I think, glows in the dark like they do. I'm sure that was law at some point, as far as cars go, is to protect anybody from getting trapped in a trunk or front trunk. Headlight washers, these little things here wash your headlights. Now, I wasn't sure how you activated those. I thought it was just using your windshield wiper washer. It's not, in fact, how you do it. There is a little button here, if I get the light right, underneath your windshield wiper yoke. What is this thing that looks like a blinker arm? Anyway, this little button underneath, you press that, and it's quite powerful. Like, you probably don't want to have a car next to you sitting at a stoplight when you activate that. You might get them wet and make them mad. This is going to be obvious to anybody that's driven a sport one before, but I knew you could engage the sport suspension, and that would, well, the sport, if you hit sport mode, it's going to obviously have different shift points. So it's going to be more aggressive in the upshifts and downshifts, and that automatically engages the PASM. I'm going to get the acronym wrong, but Porsche Active Stability Management or Suspension Management, something like that. Basically, it can adjust your shocks so they're tighter, so you get better suspension. What I didn't realize is you could activate just the suspension by itself. So you can have sport mode on and then turn off the active dampers there on your shock, so that let's say you want it to shift more aggressively, but you don't want the hard suspension, then you can just turn that off. But also vice versa. You can activate the suspension without the sport mode and the more aggressive shift point. So that's something I did not realize. I pointed this out, I think, in the last video, that of course you could put a SIM card in here for the car functionality. You probably wouldn't want to do that. This little sensor here is for light and dark. It determines, whether it's light or dark, so it knows if you have the setting to auto, to change the color to a night scheme versus a day scheme. Now, what I'm curious about is, well, I'm kind of curious about SOS. I did press that. It seemed like it was about to make a call. Even though I don't have a SIM card, there must be some built-in functionality where it can make an emergency call to, I don't know, Porsche headquarters. So if anybody knows, let me know. This little sensor here, I saw something in the owner's manual as if there was something you could do to transfer the data of this infotainment PCM module to your computer. Now, this is so out of date that I don't know that that would be useful, but just heads up there, you know, maybe that came with the car, some kind of a sensor that you could then upload the information to your computer to kind of check your, like if you go to Trip here, it's got, you know, certain information supposedly that can be transferred to your computer. I didn't realize it. For what it's worth here in the, whoa, blinded by the blue light. There was this little unit here that had, there we go, 2 RCA jacks and then a switch. And someone wisely put comments saying that's a Dension 500. So what that does is there's some fiber optic cables that it comes with, a little unit, but it plugs in where your CD changer does. And it's smart enough to kind of, you know, you don't have to change any codes in your radio. It just knows how to speak this PCM Porsche infotainment. And then you hook up, here it is here. It has an old connector that, like for an old iPod, the old iPhones, and then you just get one for a lightning connector there. So that's slick. So you can easily play, you know, Spotify, podcasts, you know, music, etc. on your phone through the radio. You just press the CD button here, and then it's when you go from single CD, and then when you go to the CD changer, then it takes over, and this Dension 500 thing kind of takes over. Another thing to note, this little button here on the side of that Dension module, if you flip it down, I think that's called service mode. So if you take your car into the Porsche dealer and they want to run some diagnostics, it might come across looking strange, like, hey, CD changer not hooked up, if it's on the top position, so that you just click it down to the bottom position, and then it's going to look normal to the computer. That's my understanding of that. One last thing is, get down here, there was also, I think that's a stock 12 volt there, but next to it, sticking out, obviously that's aftermarket, well, that's a USB connector. So that Dension 500, pretty cool thing, and there's newer ones that work with Bluetooth, etc., but it just makes this older unit work with a smartphone, so that's kind of slick. I'm going to give you 4 seconds. What is wrong with this stopwatch? It is missing the minute hands. They completely fell off, and if you can see, they're sitting there at the bottom of the stopwatch. So if anybody knows how you take this thing out, I'd love to be able to fix it, or maybe it's not really worth it because, I don't know, probably not going to use this much, but it would be nice to know how to get those little hands back on it. So just a little piece of trivia there about the stopwatch. Okay, this won't be an exhaustive coverage of the light switch here, of the headlights, but I thought it'd be worth noting that in this position, when you're at the parking lights, if you pull it out once, that activates your front fog lights, and if you pull it out another time, then you see these changing colors. This is your rear fog light. I think that's just on the left side. So you don't want to have that on by mistake, but I think it forces you, yeah, it forces you to turn them all off when you go to the home position. Home is like this courtesy thing. When you get out of the car, it'll leave the front like fog lights on or daytime running lights on a little bit so you can see your way home. Now, another thing that I think works if you're either in the home position or this off position, see this little thing here, these two things. I think this is very common in European cars, I think. I think what it means is if you leave your, let me turn this off, if you leave your blinker on to the left, let's say you're parked on the side of the road, and you leave your car, you take the keys out and everything, if you turn the left blinker on, it's gonna light up just your left rear and front, what is it, a running light. If you turn on the right one, it's going to illuminate just the right one. So if you're parked on the right side of the road and you have the left blinker on,
it's going to leave those little lights on front and back. And that's probably more applicable to narrow European roads, but it's just, it's a way for cars to see your car so they don't run into it. I think my BMW has that too. And I think it's smart enough to not run down the battery too. If you leave it in this position, because you're parked maybe on a very narrow road, I don't think it's going to run down your battery. So a little feature that you may not have been aware of. You probably know this, but if you turn on the keys and don't start the engine, it's going to measure your oil. Sometimes it takes seconds. If you've had it on recently, sometimes it takes quite a long time. I've been told to keep it at halfway. You don't want to overfill the oil, that can be dangerous, but keep this right kind of, mine's a little higher than halfway, but keep it at halfway and then monitor it, because you want to make sure that you're not burning oil. And there's guides like, you know, how many, like, if you burn a quart in a certain number of miles, you know, what's reasonable. So that's something to keep an eye on. Also, just be aware that this, if you use this lower stock here, this says function on it, this is where you can make setting changes. So if I go to chrono, of course you can, you keep pressing down, and then you can start the stopwatch, stop it, then reset it, which is kind of cool. Then you pull it towards you to get back out here. If you go down to, I think it's set, and then press enter, go down to display. This is where you can make changes to your center display, and the way I have it set here, if I go back, by default, it was showing me what was on the CD, which wasn't very useful because I was using my phone, so the CD information, it just wasn't really useful because of this Dension unit. So instead, I have my range, which is the top one, and the miles per gallon, which is the bottom one. So that seems like the most useful display for me.